on a contest miniature, if I'm doing metallics, I actually control my shininess by putting flat paints in my shadows and in my highlights. And so, like where I would deem it to be a shadow area, I would actually put regular opaque paints, put on real thin and blend it over the metallics. And then where it's in the highlight areas, it goes back to the metallic shade. And so when you look at it, I'm forcing the perspective of anywhere that like, you know, even if you're looking at gold, anywhere where it's dark, it's not shiny dark, it's just dark. And that's what your eyes perceive as, okay, it's metallic. It's got its light areas and dark areas. And so it's almost like a kind of a faux metal, I guess. You can kind of see on this guy's sword right here, it's painted in metallics, yet everywhere where I have different colors in, those are flat colors of paint. So it actually gets rid of the metallic shine. So it will only allow it to shine where I allow it to shine. And that's another way of controlling your paint and telling it will only be shiny where I'm telling you the highlights are. So you're completely in control of the paint job at that point. The thing that's bad about that is you know, some people will do like sky earth metallics where you have like the line of the ground. Like, have you ever been driving behind a gas truck and you look at the big circle on the back and you can actually see the line of the earth and it's like curved and everything? People will paint that and it looks really cool, just like that. And then you start turning the model like this and it starts getting, whoa! Like, I don't know what he was thinking, you know? But, I mean, it's a cool effect, but it only works from one angle. So you have to be really careful with your metallics to be vague enough for it to sell as metallics, but cool enough to be cool, you know? So a lot of people, that's where a lot of people fail on their metallics when they start using colors to shade and highlight them. But I like that because I like to control how everything looks. And when you look at it, like, that's like the snapshot in time. That's exactly how that armor was glinting in the sunlight of that day. So that's another one, though, that you really just have to do a bunch of times to figure out what looks right. You got to fail a few times. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think when you have miniatures that are quite small, the more shiny they are, the more toy-like they look.
Yeah.
And less realistic. I mean,
exactly.
as your size goes down, you've really got to damp down the shininess of any metal.
Exactly, and the problem is when you're looking at it, if the light's reflecting off the shininess, a lot of times it will reflect an entire area and just erase any work that you did on that because it's so shiny. And so that's why I like to make it, if it's going to have a shiny glint off of it, that shiny glint's painted. And it will never change as you're looking at it. And I can control that. You're looking at the shoulder and only the very tip of the top is like exploded. Yeah. So you can see I'm just kind of slowly bringing up those highlights on the bumps here. And then I can switch in the shadows.
You kind of stipple that when you do the brush.
Yeah, I have a lot of different ways of blending, and you really need to develop. Like, when I first started, it was like, oh, how do you blend? And it, like, in my thoughts, it was there's only one way to do it. And then as you start learning, there's lots of ways. Some of the ways that people blend is you can actually put paint on your model and then clean off your brush real quick and come back in and just kind of pull it out. That's really a shiny piece of plastic, but you can kind of see, like, when I go into the paint and then pull it back, it pulls back less paint. And if you control it right with your brush and the pressure of your brush, I always tell people, watch what you're painting, watch what happens when, you know, if you push your brush hard, if you use the tip, if you use the side, whatever, you'll start seeing that your paint, how it reacts differently. And I can actually, when I'm painting something like a sword, I can take the color, and if I push harder at the bottom, like at the top of the sword, and I'm pushing down towards my shadow area, if I push harder, it'll put less paint on the model. And then as I go down the sword, I pull up on my pressure just slightly, and we're talking like a micron of pressure, but I've gotten to the point where I've developed it where I know that my brush is coming up off the model, and I'll actually see that paint depositing more paint as I go. And it's almost just like airbrushing, but with a paintbrush. You just pull up, and it will deposit, as you pull up the pressure, it deposits more pigment. And if you're watching that and it doesn't happen when you make your brush stroke, you quickly go right back and you brush stroke it again while the paint's still wet. And so if you're constantly fixing your errors as you make them, it's really hard to go back and be like, oh, you have like this big squiggle of paint, line between two blends. It's hard once that's dry to fix that, because you actually have to color that, cover that, and then re-blend over it. But if you just fix it immediately, like you do your brush stroke and you're like, oh, that's wrong, come back in and do it again, or even if it's bad, just wipe that paint off completely and start over. That's much easier to fix a blend that way than it is if it all dries up on you. So. Now the other thing is, when I'm painting, I'm constantly trying to think about my contrast areas, and sometimes when you're looking at a model, I used to always think the highlights are on top, and so everything's got to be bright up there, right? But like if I'm looking at his shirt, I see dark shadows right on the top of his shoulder, and you got to remember that it's okay to seemingly put black on the top of a guy's yellow hat if you need to. For artistic contrasting purposes, it can look really cool. And so one of my friends, Matthew Fontaine from Canada, was the first person I saw ever do that. And he would put really dramatic shadows on top of the model. But it just looked fantastic because it made the color that was on top of that model just explode. So obviously you can't do that in every situation. You have to kind of figure out which situations it works in. But like on this model, I'm looking in between where the armor and the skin touches. It would be cool if that was really dark, because I got this bright armor. And if I have a highlight of purple that goes up to almost white and it touches bright armor, you can't see where the one thing stopped and one thing started. So if I bring in my shadows, even though it's on top of this model, right close to that armor, just a little bit, I will get a good definition between the armor plate and the top of the model. The top purple part of the model. So that's another thing that I just start working in as I'm painting. Now, the one little thing I do on blending, kind of every once in a while, is I'll make up a mix of like 90% water and 5% paint, super thin. And I will just kind of lightly wash the area that I'm painting. It shouldn't change the color at all. Like if you noticeably see the color change, you've got too much paint. But what this does is if